In my last message, I introduced you to a guy named Matt D'Avella. Matt is a filmmaker and producer of content on YouTube. He's a kind of self-help, life coach kind of guy, and I want us to consider one more of his videos. It's entitled, Watch This Before You Die. And the reason it caught my attention was because I was curious what Matt had to say about death and dying. Let's watch the introduction to his video.
You are going to die. I don't say that to be morbid or sensational. I say it as a reminder. Because as certain as we are of that truth, most of us are living like that's not the case. But when you truly wake up to the fact that you will die one day and make each decision through that lens, you'll learn that death can teach you everything you need to know about living.
You are going to die. Of course we all know this. Most of us are living like that's not the case. Now, why would we live as if we're not going to die, as if something as significant as death, that we would try to live denying it or not facing it? Why do most of us live as if we're not going to die? Well, I think some of the reasons are obvious. Death is the end of everything. It's depressing. It's something that we can't escape. It's something that's a great unknown to us. It's scary. It's something we actually try all our lives to deny and to escape from. So what good can come from truly waking up, as Matt says, to the fact that we will die one day? How will making each decision through that lens, the lens that we're going to die one day, teach me everything I need to know about living? Let's watch some more of the video.
It seems like a complete no-brainer, right? We're all going to die someday, so we might as well go after the things that we want most. We should start that business, run the marathon, reconnect with a family member, because, well, you've only got one shot. We all know this.
You've only got one shot. We all know this. So how should we live our lives with this in mind, with our death in mind, with the fact that knowing that we only have this one life to live? Well, Ben and Matt suggest it's this way. We should ask ourselves, what's most important to me? You see, keeping our death in mind, the end of our lives in mind, should cause us to focus on thinking about what's really important in life, what we should be spending this one life that we have on. What is it that we want to do or to have before we die? We should each make our own bucket list. What's on my bucket list? What are the things that I really want to do before I die? That's what we're told here that we should be doing in light of our death. Now, Jesus would agree with some of what Ben and Matt are telling us. There are similarities. For example, Jesus would agree, you have only one shot, only this one life, and you better make that shot, you better make this life count. He said often to those who he was speaking to, you should think about your death. You should think about the end of life. And in doing so, you should think about, in the light of that, what really is important. You should think about what it is that you're spending your life on. So he agreed, death can teach us about how to live life. But there are some very important differences between what Matt and Ben and the world tell us and what we think we really know and what Jesus tells us. For example, Jesus tells us that death is not an end, but a beginning. Jesus tells us that realizing your dreams is not what's really important. Jesus tells us doing everything on your bucket list isn't the good life. Jesus tells us God cares about how you live your life. Jesus tells us how you live your life affects your eternal destiny. Jesus tells us, God cares more than you do that you live a truly good life. You see, what Jesus tells us really is profoundly different than what Matt and Ben and the world tell us. And that difference makes a profound difference in how a person lives their lives. We need to remember that Jesus didn't come just to give us another world religion. He didn't come just to give us another moral system for us to adhere to or by which we could live our lives. He didn't come just to give us a way out of hell or a ticket into heaven. Jesus said that he came so that we might have life, true life, abundant life, the life that is life. How do we find that life? Was he telling us the truth? Is it something that we should really give our lives for and we can live and enter into? Jesus told us that our lives are a gift from God. And as such, since he is our creator and sustainer, we are accountable to him for how we live. And Jesus says that at the end of this life, it just won't be the end. In fact, it will be a time of judgment where we will be judged by God, our creator, our sustainer, our maker. We will be judged by him for how we lived our lives, how we used the life, this precious life that he entrusted to us. Jesus talked about these things again and again. Let me give you just one example. His parable of the rich man or the rich fool. Let me read that parable for you. Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions, he tells the people. And then he gives them this parable to illustrate that point. And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, 'You have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?' And Jesus concludes this parable with this. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God." Now I want you to note that the rich man was not a particularly evil man. In fact, he wasn't an evil man at all. There was no gross sin in his life. In fact, he was a very hardworking, respectable, smart, successful man. I'm sure he was admired by the people of his day, admired by the people that Jesus was speaking this parable to. He's admired by most of us. It's the kind of life we would like to have. It's the kind of life we would like to have for our children. Successful life with a good retirement. Eat, drink, and be merry. His dreams are fulfilled. His aspirations were realized. Exactly what Matt and Ben and the world tells us to do. This is making your one shot count. This is real success. This is the fullness of life. We all know that that's how we think. But how profoundly different was God's evaluation of this man's life. God said to him, "You fool, this very night, your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And Jesus adds, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. How do we live a life that is rich toward God? Well, is it by living a very religious life? Is it by giving away all your money or all that you have? Was that what the rich man was supposed to do? Is it by becoming a monk or a nun? Or you see, we figure that if we give our lives to God, if we are going to live a life that's rich toward God, it's probably going to ruin our lives. We're going to have to be fanatics or religious kooks, or we're going to have to do things and give up things that's just going to make our life difficult and that we don't want to do. It's a mistake to think that God wants to ruin your life. Remember what Jesus said? He didn't say, I have come to ruin your life. He said, I have come to give you the life that is truly life. You see, the mistake of thinking that God wants to ruin our lives, that somehow we know better how to live our lives, is the mistake that Adam and Eve made in the Garden of Eden. It's the original sin. You remember that Adam and Eve are in paradise. They're in the Garden of Eden. And God told them in Genesis 3 this, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die. They were living the fullest life, the fullness of life, the life that is life. They're in the Garden of Eden. God warned them, don't disobey me, don't turn away from me, trust me on this. I know what is best for you. Don't eat of that tree. If you do, you will die. But we also read in the text, and we know that they didn't listen to God. Here's what the text says. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. It looked good. It looked like the satisfying life. It was good for food. It was pleasing to the eye. It was desirable for gaining wisdom. They were wrong. And because they did not believe God, they forfeited the truly good life that He intended for them. This is really what Jesus was telling us when He said this. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? What good is it to accomplish everything on your bucket list, to gain the whole world, if in doing so you forfeit, you give up your true self? That is the life that God intended you to live, the person that God intended you to be, created you to be. That is where the true fullness of life is. And to forfeit it, to gain even the whole world, is foolish. Let's watch some more of the video.
So why aren't we taking action?
Duh, right? We should obviously go after the things that we want to in life. We obviously have a finite amount of time to do it in. Why isn't everybody creating bucket lists and going out and achieving and attempting to achieve all the things they've wanted to?
I think it's human nature to put off our personal goals, because if you think about it, there's no deadlines for personal goals, but we have all these deadlines for every other goal set in our lives. So we have, we have work goals, we have life goals, and we have birthdays, we have payments. We always have something that has a deadline, and then there's consequences if you don't hit that deadline. With our personal goals, we don't have a deadline, so we're like, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week, I'll do it next year, until most people realize that, crap, like, it's too late. And there's this really interesting study from this psychologist at Cornell who basically talked with all these people on their deathbed and found that most people at the end of their life don't regret the things they did, they regret the things they didn't do. And 76% of people, when they hit their deathbed, their number one regret in their entire life is living a life someone else wanted for them, not themselves.
So, studies tell us that 76% of people at the end of their life regret having lived the life someone else wanted for them and not themselves. 76%, Ben suggests, or the sociologist suggests, 76% wished that they had completed the things on their bucket list, or at least some of those things. But Jesus tells us something very different. He tells us that 100% of the people, when they stand before God, will regret not having lived the life that He wanted for them. 100% will regret not having lived for God, not having been rich toward God when they come to the end of their life. The world, Ben and Matt, and even our own selves want to believe, tells us death is the end. There's nothing after death. So you might as well live for everything you can get. You might as well live for yourself. Write your own bucket list. Spend your life doing those things that you want to do. You're not accountable to anyone but yourself. The good life is getting what you want. Do you see how it's just like what we read in Genesis? It sounds so good to us. It sounds like it's good for food. It is pleasing to the eye, and it is also desirable for gaining wisdom. Jesus said, "This is the way to true life. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it." It's not what we want to hear, is it? Are you familiar with these words? Many of us are, and they can go in one ear and out the other. We can give some kind of agreement with it. But are we living it? Have we tried? Are we seeking the life that Jesus, that God tells us is the truly full life, the abundant life, the life that is life, the life that will really matter in the end, the life that, if lived, will have no regrets at the end of our life? You see, the world tells us, don't deny yourself, satisfy yourself. The world tells us, don't pick up a cross, don't follow Jesus. Pick up your own bucket list, follow yourself, find yourself, do what you want. The world tells us, don't lose your life for Jesus, save yourself. So who's right? Matt, Ben, the world? What you think is right? Or is Jesus right? It matters how you answer that question. When we think about death, what that means, is it the end, or is it a time when we will stand before God and have to answer to Him? When we think about death, and we think about where is the truly full life? What life is it that is worth living? That is the truly good life? Is it really self-seeking? Is it crossing everything off our bucket list? Or is it the life of being a disciple of Jesus Christ, of denying yourself, of taking up your cross daily and following him? Who's right? Who are you going to listen to?
You are going to die. I don't say that to be morbid or sensational. I say it as a reminder. Because as certain as we are of that truth, most of us are living like that's not the case. But when you truly wake up to the fact that you will die one day, and make each decision through that lens, you'll learn that death can teach you everything you need to know about living.